It's iconic. The most famous police sketch in history is the Unabomber.
The terrorist called Unabomber is planning to blow up an airliner sometime during the next 6 days.
He's targeting airlines, scientists, computers, forestry people.
We have done every kind of victimology. His victims are totally random.
That profile is wrong. He's lonely, he's smart, extremely precise. He feels underappreciated, victimized, and he's angry. You figure out the philosophy, you can figure out the man, you can crack the code.
An operation of this size and scale is unprecedented. We believe it to be a singular opportunity to lure the Unabomber into the light.
You have the full support of the DOJ.
All I have to do is write your name on a box. And I can reach out and touch anyone, anywhere. If the box comes with your name on it, you can't even imagine doing anything other than obey it.
The FBI recommendation is that we publish the manifesto.
This is the reckoning. He's been outsmarting us the whole time.
Everybody's wrong except for you.
I know him like I know myself.
We need a guilty plea from Ted. This is our only shot. You're our only shot.
Manhunt Unabomber, an 8-episode event, starts Tuesday, August 1st at 9 on Discovery and the Discovery Go app.
Hey.
Well, thanks so much for being here.
Real pleasure, thank you.
Thanks for coming back. We had you last time for Shelter, a wonderful film that you directed.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was a while ago now.
Yeah, maybe a couple years ago. Let's talk about this series and what interested you in playing Ted Kaczynski, because he's a absolutely fascinating man. This is a sort of, up until this point, I think the longest running FBI manhunt in history, right?
Yep.
Is it still that? I'm not sure.
Yes, it is. Because he made everything himself. I think the only thing he was really buying was soldering iron. You know, I mean, everything else he made the epoxy out of the hooves of animals that he was trapping, and so there was no fingerprint for him. There's no footprint. They couldn't find him.
And he was I guess this is going to sound bad, but he was a brilliant man, brilliant mathematician at the very least. Deranged maybe, but incredibly intelligent.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think that I don't think one can feel sympathy for him, and I don't think that the show looks to elicit sympathy, but you can absolutely feel empathy for the child who, was brilliant, 168 IQ. Is moved 2 grades ahead at puberty, ends up in Harvard by the age of 16, and is then experimented on by the CIA for 3 years. And by the way, his code name when he was in that project was Lawful. Right, that was his code name for him, and it was a humiliating experience that went on for 3 years. And this 16-year-old boy, and
there were experiments that were specifically about sort of belittlement and punishment, right?
Exactly. Sorry, I haven't explained myself well. The experiments were all about the objective was mind control. And was about breaking Soviet spies, and so they were experimenting this new technique of humiliation on these children, of which he was absolutely the youngest, having arrived at Harvard at 16, and I guess looking for friends, Anyway, so then he ends up at Michigan, starts writing proofs that 5 people in the world can understand, and then becomes the youngest tenured professor in Berkeley history at 23 years old, and then disappears into the woods and starts killing people. And that bit of it is monstrous and is impossible to feel sympathy for. But the bit of it that you, I think, can feel empathy for is that incredibly damaged child.
Now, getting the chance to play someone like Ted Kaczynski, there's an incredible amount of research that you can pour through. You can look through, just the personal life, the things that we've been talking about, or you can look at his place in history and what in history he tried to affect. Essentially, where did you sort of fall in when you were doing your research in Kaczynski?
Well, a couple of things became really. I mean, I did a lot of things. A lot of them weren't very useful. The things that were useful were living on my own in the cabin in the woods and sort of trying to experience that.
You separated yourself for a little while from family and friends?
Yeah, but I wasn't, I had running water and electricity and it was very lovely, thank you very much. But
Still getting your assistant to get you stuff at the town?
Didn't have an assistant, but apart from that, you're very close. But I did. I separated. I had days, and weekends, and I think the longest I did it for was 3 days. I'm a father. I got to be in contact, but I wanted to sort of experience aloneness for 3 days because we don't get that with texting and email and just being online and checking the news, and to really switch off and not have any of that for 3 days, not have contact with people. And it's funny, when I came into work on Monday morning and my voice cracked because I hadn't needed to use it, So that was useful. Also, his reading list, when the FBI took him down at the cabin, they obviously itemized everything that was in this 10x8 cabin. And one thing that I found really useful was his reading list, which especially of the novels that he was reading, and they were really almost it was like a caricature. If I were writing a serial bomber who was alienated from the world, it was like Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. It was like Conrad's The Secret Agent. It was Arthur Koestler's Darkness at Noon. It was The Stranger.
A series of does.
Yeah. It was all about. Everyone had an anti-hero who felt alienated from society. And I mean, in Conrad's Secret Agent, it's about an anarchist who's trying to create the perfect trigger switch for a homemade bomb, which is absolutely what the FBI still has no idea how he made the compounds that he made out of stuff in the woods, out of the roots of mushrooms and manure, and he made compounds so explosive that they're terrifying. The man was brilliant. He is brilliant.
There's no way that you could speak to him, I assume, or anything like that for the role, right?
No. I think,
imagine he would want to.
I'm not sure either of us would have enjoyed that. I think it would have been. It's a moot conversation anyway, because the length of time it takes to get clearance for that kind of thing. The show would be over before I would have got to speak to him.
Did you read any of his manifesto?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's not that long. But
is it like industrial society and its future, or just industry and its future? I don't remember.
Industrial society.
Yeah.
And its future. And the premise is that the Industrial Revolution has been a disaster for mankind, and that we should all be living a sort of agrarian existence. But there's a lot that people will connect with. We have too much reliance on machinery and technology, and it's actually imprisoning us. And I think there's a lot that anybody who has a child who sits on their iPad on a device and isn't in contact with it will resonate with them, that we're losing contact with ourselves as humans, I suppose, through. So there's stuff that still really resonates, and I also got to read his unpublished autobiography, which is pretty honest. And
honest in what way?
Just details. It's the sort of their diary details and as honest as he can be, you know, about his sort of motivations and his sense of guilt and how he sort of assuages that guilt. You know, it's pretty fascinating reading. So that was useful. The reading list, you know, his sort of stranger novels, you know, all of his alienated young men novels that he was interested in, and aloneness, I found really useful for building the character.
Can I ask what beard? Can I ask what wasn't useful that you did? Because that's always a fascinating part of the process when it comes to acting. That you try to gather like as many clues or pieces of evidence for yourself so you feel comfortable going into the process, but then at the same time you might find that a few things that you gathered really had nothing to do with where you needed to go.
Sure. I think there were a few biographies I read, all of the documentaries I found totally useless. I found listening to his family members that knew him, which I thought was going to be extraordinarily important. I found it totally useless for me, not for anybody else, but just because I didn't want their version. I wanted what I was trying to get to was sort of Ted's version of himself, you know. And the other thing that was really, I think, very useful for me was, as I was there are 8 hours of television. The 8th hour really takes place mostly during the courtroom stuff. And as I was reading the 8th episode, I realized that there were a lot of real victim statements. And so I stopped reading, and I said I didn't want to read any more of the script until we came to shoot that, and it was really horrifying, because they were really horrifying, and to actually sit there on camera as Ted and sort of see that and really take that in for the first time, experience was a good trick.
Because so much of what happened to these victims was almost theoretical to him when he was doing it, right? He wasn't necessarily watching the news. He wasn't really taking in what really happened to these people. They were all sort of part of a puzzle of ideas rather than the actual sort of
I wonder about that
violence that he actually inflicted.
I wonder about that, because the thing that the thing that I could never quite figure out is, this is a brilliant man, and he wants to destroy the system, right, that is imprisoning us all. And he's a brilliant man. Why not take down the national power grid? Why have you got to kill people? In some guy who's running some crappy little computer shop, you know, it doesn't quite make sense. That if that is the thing, this is my opinion and my opinion only, but if that is the thing that you're angry at, is technology, well, there are better ways to go about taking that down. Why this guy who's just gone around trying to make a small business for himself, who's a nerd, who's into computers, and why do that? Why not take down the national grid with all of your, you know, brilliance, and if that's the way you feel. So I think that something else was happening. There was either his fury at technology was either an excuse for, or a justification for, rather. But I think there was just an anger at his alienation and his inability to connect with people. And he had fallen through every net. Nobody saved him, you know, as a kid.
In terms of sort of striking these sort of everyday people who happen to be working with computers in some capacity, it seems like the sort of the general symbolic idea of terrorism. You're striking fear into the heart of the masses by going after everyday people rather than, like you said, the power grid of some kind. Was it sort of just classic terrorism, you think, on his part?
I think I mean, it's really important that you bring that up. He is a terrorist. He's a homegrown terrorist. I think it's a very controversial time to make a show about homegrown terrorists, and a very important time because of that. He absolutely, I think the contract, and I think the reason it makes for good drama, to be converted into good drama, is that the contract that you make with the state is that you'll leave your sword at the gates of the city because the city is going to protect you with its walls and its police, right? And then every administration says, well, the last administration let monsters, and the monsters are inside the wall, and we have to deal with this, right? That's the way it all works, and it's the way horror works. It's the way. Will the monsters get inside the house? In fact, are the monsters in the walls? And in fact, in the Ridley Scott's genius Alien, is the monster inside your corporal body? And God forbid, does the state want it to be there? That's what's amazing about Alien, I think. And here is a story about a monster created inside the city walls by the very police force that was saying it's there, that is saying it's there to protect you, in order to protect you, in order to be able to learn how to break Soviet spies, they create this, or a part of creating this monster.
And he's such a fascinating, quote unquote terrorist. I don't need to put that in quotes. He was a terrorist.
He was a terrorist.
He's such a fascinating one because he, in terms of homegrown terrorism, doesn't really fall on the far right like Timothy McVeigh, or the sort of far left like certain environmental eco-terrorists of the late 90s, early 2000s. Yeah. He's not necessarily in the middle, but his beliefs and his manifesto has different elements of each sort of spectrum of political belief.
Absolutely, he was furiously anti-communist, and yet, but you read some of his writings. They're very some of it is very confused about as far as how much he really cares about the environment. Not very much. What he cares about, I suppose, is that technology seems to be imprisoning us and taking away our
individual liberty and freedom.
Yeah, our autonomy, and that seems to be really his biggest beef. But, and again, I think it's really hard to disentangle how much of it is a justification for this fury that he seemed to feel at just people who were able to just live their lives in community, which seems absolutely impossible for him.
Complete alienation.
Yeah.
Going back to Crime and Punishment, like very Raskolnikov-like.
Exactly.
Like his philosophies end up being just a kind of justification for an alienation and his ability to survive. Before I move on to audience questions.
But how about also the self-awareness of those books are in his, those are the books that are in his cabin. He's a very bright man. He must know what the author's point is. And that sort of self-awareness, to be able to actually know that about, I was sort of surprised that they were.
Well, it's the idea that we take away from art sometimes what we want to see and what we want to feel. So maybe he had that self-awareness, but it might also be that he took away from Crime and Punishment the parts that truly appealed to him and may have glossed over the sort of redemptive, the entire epilogue of Crime and Punishment in Serbia, which is this sort of redemptive moment of him finding love.
Right.
Maybe he ripped that part out of the book.
Right.
Let's get some questions from the audience right here.
Hi.
Hey.
Thanks so much for being here.
It's a pleasure.
I was just wondering how you found out about the role and what drew you to it. You've played a lot of iconic characters in the past, so you obviously have fantastic taste when it comes to picking
Thank you very much.
to play.
What drew me to it? Well, it's a news story that made it over to England at a time really before the internet, and so I was aware of it. It made the papers. That means it made the papers and it made TV news, and And when the project came around, I thought, God, yeah, I know the Unabomber, I know Ted Kaczynski, and then I thought, actually, what do I really know? I know the photo, I know the photo for image, and I know the picture of him as a sort of looking like a homeless hermit, you know, filthy, dirty, being taken out of the woods in Montana. And so I started doing a little research, and then the script showed up. And it turns out just that one image, he was making a bomb. So he put on really filthy clothes and was covered in dust from filing. So your image, he's sold as this sort of hermit that's let himself go, who's, in actual fact, his cabin was in very clean order and very organized, and he was quite fastidious. I mean, obviously, he was really fastidious. So, but the impression that the media leave you with is of this. So then I thought, wow, there's something here, and I guess I was looking for something that a story that TV would deal with well, right? So if this were a film, it would necessarily become a thriller because you got an hour and 30 minutes. And then it becomes a story about a dogged maverick cop chasing a monster. And 8 hours gives you, because, you know, I'm sure you're sitting there going, how do I fill 8 hours? My God. And it gives you the time to look at the domestic life of Ted Kaczynski and look at the domestic life of, Agent Fitzgerald, Special Agent Fitzgerald, who lost his wife and his family to his obsession. And that, I thought, was interesting and made use of the episodic medium.
You talk about the impression that the media leaves when it comes to someone like Ted Kaczynski, or when it comes to Ted Kaczynski, dirty, filthy, looking like a homeless man, or, you know, the hoodie over his head, the sort of the very ominous drawing of him. And what this miniseries does is kind of, it doesn't just show a different side of him, it almost lets him combat that kind of propagandistic image that has been left of him. You know, he says at one point, or you say as him, you know, they want people to believe that I am crazy. They want people to sort of believe. Why is it that they are so focused on putting forward this image of me and stopping me?
Why is it so important to them? Yeah.
Yeah. But you think that's so fascinating? Yeah,
and yes, because I think they were terrified. They knew he was the smartest guy in the room, and they knew that, in actual fact, his argument that, well, I will spoil the show, that, you know, his argument held water, and there was a very good chance, were he allowed to defend himself, that he would, worst case scenario, get himself off. And there is an argument to say he would have. And, you know, next best is that he's got this huge mouthpiece of the American media listening to him and able to push his agenda, and they just didn't want that. I mean, it's a really interesting story. For instance, the photo fit, there were 2 photo fits done of him, and I think they were like 10 years apart. And when the second one was done, they asked the same woman, obviously, it was a different artist. And so she said, okay, yes, and started drawing. It was a very different picture. And she actually drew the original sketch artist. The drawing of the Unabomber that we all remember looks like the original sketch artist that she used 10 years before.
Next question.
Hi, Mr. Bentley. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. My name's Michael. I'm from Jersey. So I'm just curious, were there any past action thriller villains or stories that influenced the way you portray this character?
Very much no. No, very much no. I felt a responsibility. He's a real human being, and I mean, obviously, I'm left with my interpretation of that, and I felt I also just didn't want to rely on a lot of the, you know, I'm 46 years old. Well, I've been doing this for a long time. One builds up an arsenal of tricks and tools to use as an actor, and I really wanted to focus on not doing that and being as present as I could be in the scenes. So no. I mean, I'm sure I stole things, but I'm not conscious of the things that I thieved from better actors.
It would have been amazing if you pulled out some random iconic villain to play Ted Kaczynski.
It would be great.
Like, what? I think I have time for one more question.
Hi. Since you don't have the opportunity to meet Ted, if you did, what would you say?
That is a really, really good question. And I've thought about that a lot. And so I have an answer ready for you. Because I really have thought, God, what would I even want to know? And what I would want to know is why not? Why not take down the national grid? Why not make something that is more symbolic? If these bombings, which he's attests to, were symbolic bombings, why did they have to have flesh and blood in them? Why not create terror in a different way by taking out the national power grid? Even in my country during the IRA bombing campaign in the 70s, 80s, 90s, mainland Britain, most of the time there were warnings for people to get out of buildings, and then the bomb went off in the building, but there were no casualties most of the time. So why, if that was his intention, why not make better use of his time and brilliance rather than these incredibly aggressive, quite singular acts against individuals? That's the thing that I would want to know. Professors, somebody who runs a computer store, a burgeoning computer store. That's my question. Would be my question.
It's a fascinating question. I definitely can't answer it. I think we were trying to answer it earlier, and I think it's the one idea that you said of a jealousy of people who can live and work in regular communities, who can live daily lives. And I think it's also the idea of being able to strike fear into the heart of millions through individual, seemingly random acts of terror. Like it could happen to you. I remember during the Unabomber, when people were at the height of the Unabomber and everyone was like kind of scared of it, people were just scared that they might get mail that had a bomb in it. They didn't really attribute it to computer people or anything. It was any random person felt like they could get mail with a bomb in it, which is sort of a terrifying thing because, like, I think he even says, everybody gets mail and never thinks about it.
Yeah, and that's quite powerful. That's kind of power of somebody who feels powerless. I mean, that's an incredible to hold that much sway over a nation as big as, well, any nation, but a nation as big as this one, to have that much attention, having had none. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Must be intoxicating for somebody like that. Yeah, it's interesting.
Now, before I let you go, I'm sure this has nothing to do with this, but I'm sure there are some fans here. Infinity War, you guys are done shooting it, right?
Done shooting it? Well, no.
Never done. Never done.
No, monsieur. No. This.
You just hear Marvel hear you say that?
No, I have they inject little micro explosions into my.
Not done. Never mind.
Don't say that. No, we're not.
Spoiler.
We're not done. We are not done until end of the year. So it's been going on a long time. I go back again in September, and it's the biggest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, I come in very early in the morning, as you can imagine, with somebody with so much makeup.
You see 6 hours every morning, right? Something?
No, it's quick. It's like 2 hours. But it is, so I'm coming in at dawn, and you just see this city of lights, and then as you get closer, you realize, oh wow, it's in the middle of nowhere, but these are just trailers. It's like a town. I mean, it's just enormous. I've never worked on a production like it.
Where are you guys shooting?
We're in all over the place, Scotland and Atlanta at the moment.
Oh, wow. And so, like, you just take over, basically create a town for the shoot.
Yeah, I mean, it's wherever we go and it moves, and you know, it's just huge.
One more question for you before you left. You know, as I said at the beginning of this, last time you were here, you were promoting a film that you had directed, which is no small feat. I'm wondering if after having directed, you plan on doing it again, or if, like some people, you did it and you were like, got that out of my system. It's a tough business. I'm gonna.
No, I really want to do something. I want to do a comedy. I do. I've got a comedy that I really want to do. Sort of satire.
Did that come from the editing room while you were editing? I gotta do a comedy, man.
I gotta do it.
Getting rough.
This is depressing the fuck out of me. Yeah. No, I'd actually written the comedy first. The comedy has a lot of people in it, and a lot of different. You're needing to follow a lot of different people's psychology and understand it, and Shelter was 2 people, so I was like, I'll do that one, you know. So
your bearings, and then do a multi-strand.
Yeah. It sounds like I should have done that. It sounds like that would have been the easier project to take on, but actually, it's the Shelter. It just being 2 people and a 2-hander basically was. I felt like I could control that.
I thought you did a wonderful job. I'm
Thank
looking
you very
forward
much.
to your next movie. So Manhunt Unabomber premieres Tuesday, August 1st. It's an 8-episode event, 9 p.m. Tuesday, August 1st. Is this is it a weekly event thing, or is this going to be sort of 8 episodes in a row, 8 nights?
I believe it's a weekly event thing. Is anybody out there that can tell me different?
I believe that's true.
I think it's weekly.
Paul,
but
thanks
check.
Tuesday, August 1st, 9 p.m. on Discovery. Paul Bettany, everybody. Thanks, Paul. Good to see you. Thank you.